October 23, 1935, 21:14. Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. The air inside the back room of the Palace Chop House was thick enough to chew. It smelled of stale cigar smoke, expensive pomade, and the metallic tang of a heavy rain hitting the pavement outside. Dutch Schultz, born Arthur Flegenheimer, sat at the head of the table. He wasn't eating, he was counting. Not money, but the seconds between the ticks of the wall clock. Click. The sound of a lighter flicking open. To his right sat Otto Abadaba Berman, the math wizard who could manipulate pari-mutuel betting odds, like a god playing with clay. But Dutch wasn't looking at the ledgers. He was looking at Otto's wrist. As Berman reached for a glass of rye, his cuff slid back. Deep, purple-yellow bruises circled his forearm. 4 distinct finger marks and a thumb, a grip of steel. Dutch's eyes went cold. The beer baron of the Bronx didn't see a wounded friend. He saw a security breach. In this world, a bruise wasn't an injury. It was a confession. It meant someone had gotten close enough to touch the man who knew where every cent of the Schultz empire was buried. "Otto," Dutch said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that made the other 2 men at the table stop chewing. "You've been clumsy." Berman pulled his sleeve down, his face turning the color of ash. "It's nothing, Arthur. Just a misunderstanding at the docks. A crate slipped." Dutch leaned in. The light from the overhead lamp caught the sweat on his forehead. "Crates don't have fingers, Otto, and crates don't talk to the special prosecutor's office. Thomas Dewey is breathing down my neck, and suddenly my numbers man looks like he's been in a wrestling match with the law." The tension was a physical weight. To understand how the most powerful mobster in New York began to unravel, we have to look back at the walls closing in, and the moment Dutch realized that the only thing more dangerous than his enemies was the silence of his friends. The hook was set, but Dutch wasn't going to wait for the trap to spring. 3 weeks earlier, the Embassy Social Club, Bronx. The Bronx was a kingdom built on illegal needles and wooden beer barrels. Dutch Schultz didn't just run the city. He owned the atmosphere. But in late 1935, the atmosphere was changing. The IRS was circling, and Thomas Dewey, the relentless prosecutor, had turned Dutch into public enemy number 1. Dutch paced the length of the club. The floorboards creaked under his expensive Italian leather shoes. He was a man who lived in a constant state of calculated agitation. Every siren in the distance was a personal insult. Every new face in the neighborhood was a potential Fed. "They're squeezing us, Arthur," Bo Weinberg, his top enforcer, had warned him days prior. "The Italian Commission, Lucky Luciano and the boys, they think you're too hot. They think your war with Dewey is going to burn the whole city down." Dutch hated the Commission. He hated the way they sipped espresso and talked about business as if they weren't all murderers. He was a street fighter. He believed in the old ways. If someone squeezes you, you break their hand. But when he saw those bruises on Otto Berman at the Palace Chop House, his mind didn't go to Dewey. It went to the Italians. He suspected Berman had been picked up by Luciano's men for a friendly chat about Dutch's whereabouts. "You think I'm a fool, Otto?" Dutch whispered in the present back at the table. He reached out and grabbed Berman's bruised wrist, squeezing exactly where the pain was freshest. Berman winced but didn't cry out. That was the mistake. A guilty man stays quiet to prove his toughness. An innocent man screams, "I gave you everything," Dutch hissed. "I gave you the numbers. I gave you protection. If you're talking to Lucky or if you're talking to the DA, I need to know now, because the only thing that costs more than loyalty is a lie." Dutch let go of the wrist, but the shadow of doubt had already darkened the room. He was about to make a move that would change the history of the American Mafia forever. October 23, 1935, 21:40, Palace Chop House. Dutch turned away from Berman and looked at his bodyguard, Lulu Rosenkrantz. Lulu was a mountain of a man, loyal as a dog, but twice as bitey. He was cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife, seemingly oblivious to the psychological execution happening at the table. "Lulu," Dutch called out, "go to the front, watch the street. If a car idles for more than 10 seconds, I want to know the color of the driver's eyes." Lulu nodded and disappeared. Dutch turned back to the bruised Berman. The mathlete of the mob was trembling now. The Palace Chop House was supposed to be a safe haven, a neutral ground in Newark away from the heat of New York City. But Dutch had realized there was no such thing as neutral ground when you were at war with the world. "I'm not talking to anyone, Arthur," Berman pleaded. "I swear on my mother. Some punks tried to roll me for the bag. I fought them off, that's all." Dutch feigned a smile. It was a terrifying sight, a jagged, joyless expression. "I believe you, Otto, truly. That's why we're going to solve this. We're going to kill Thomas Dewey." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to stop. Killing a prosecutor was the ultimate taboo. It was the red line. If you kill a cop, they hunt you. If you kill a prosecutor, they dismantle your entire world. The commission had already told Dutch, no. "You can't," Berman whispered. "The Italians will kill us all before the law does." "The Italians are businessmen," Dutch spat. "I'm a soldier. If Dewey dies, the heat dies. If the heat dies, we go back to making millions. And if you're worried about those bruises, Otto, don't be. Because by tomorrow nobody will care about your arm. They'll be looking at the hole in the DA's head." But Dutch didn't know that his plan had already been leaked. The bruises on Otto's arm weren't from a mugging. They were the first sign of a much larger betrayal. 2 days earlier, a basement in East Harlem. To understand Dutch's paranoia, we have to look at the secret meeting of the Big Seven. Lucky Luciano, the visionary of modern organized crime, sat across from Albert Anastasia, the head of Murder Inc. "Schultz is a mad dog," Luciano said, his voice smooth and cold. "He wants to hit Dewey. He asked for permission. I told him if he touches a hair on that man's head, it's the end of the line for him." "He won't listen," Anastasia replied, leaning against a damp brick wall. "He's losing his mind. The IRS has him in a corner, and a cornered dog bites everyone, including his masters." It was during this week that the commission decided Dutch Schultz had to go, but they couldn't just shoot him in the street. He was too powerful, too well connected in the Bronx. They needed a way in. They needed someone close to him. They had snatched Otto Berman off the street for 10 minutes. They didn't want information on the books. They wanted to plant a seed of doubt. They handled him roughly, knowing Dutch would see the marks. They knew Dutch's mind would spiral. They weren't just killing a man, they were engineering a breakdown. Back at the Palace Chop House, Dutch was falling right into the trap. He looked at his right-hand man and saw a traitor. He looked at the door and saw an assassin. He was playing a game of chess where his own pieces were moving against him. "You're staying here tonight, Otto," Dutch said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We all are. We wait for the word. When the call comes that Dewey is gone, we move." What Dutch didn't realize was that the call had already been made, but it wasn't about Dewey. It was a contract out on a man named Arthur Flegenheimer. October 23, 1935, 22:10. The dining room. Dutch Schultz decided he was hungry. It was the hunger of a man who knew his time was short, even if he wouldn't admit it to himself. He ordered steak and fried potatoes. The smell of grease filled the cramped room. Otto Berman couldn't eat. He sat staring at his bruised wrist, the skin appearing even darker under the flickering light. He knew Dutch. He knew that the shocking thing Dutch was about to do wasn't just a murder, it was an erasure. "You know why I like you, Otto?" Dutch said, mouth full of food. "Because you're a genius. You see the numbers between the numbers. But you forgot one thing tonight. You forgot the probability of survival." Dutch stood up and walked to the window. He pulled the curtain back just a fraction. Outside, a black sedan was idling. No lights, just the soft vibration of the engine through the glass. "Lulu!" Dutch screamed. Rosenkrantz ran in, his hand already inside his coat. "Yeah, boss?" "The car," Dutch pointed. "Is that ours?" Lulu looked. "No, I thought it was yours." In that moment, the legend effect took hold. Dutch Schultz, the man who had survived gang wars, assassination attempts, and the federal government, realized he was inside a coffin with the lid half closed. But he wasn't going to go out quietly. "Otto," Dutch said, turning back to the table with a terrifyingly calm expression. "Show me the bruises one more time." Berman hesitantly lifted his arm. Dutch didn't look at the bruise. He looked at the door. "I'm going to the bathroom," Dutch said. "If anyone comes through that door while I'm gone, kill them. If no one comes through that door in 5 minutes. Lulu, kill Otto." The ultimate betrayal. Dutch was sacrificing his most loyal asset just to see if the killers would hesitate. He walked toward the restroom, leaving his right-hand man to face the silence of the gun. 22:15. The hallway. Dutch Schultz stepped into the small, grimy bathroom of the Palace Chop House. The tiles were cracked, and the mirror was clouded with age. He splashed cold water on his face. He was 48, but in the reflection he looked 100. Behind the closed door, he heard it. Bam, 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 the thunder of a .45 caliber Tommy gun. It wasn't the rhythmic fire of a professional hit. It was the chaotic spray of a room being shredded. Dutch didn't reach for his gun. He leaned against the sink. He heard the screams of Otto Berman. He heard the heavy thud of Lulu Rosenkrantz hitting the floor. He heard the breaking of glass and the splintering of the mahogany table where they had just been sitting. Two men had walked into the Palace Chop House. Charles the Bug Workman and Mendy Weiss, Murder Inc.'s finest. They hadn't waited for Dutch to come out. They had emptied their magazines into everyone in the room. The door to the bathroom creaked open. Charles Workman stood there, the barrel of his gun smoking. He looked at Dutch. Dutch looked at him. There was no dialogue, no famous last words at the moment of the hit, only the cold mechanical reality of a contract being fulfilled. Workman pulled the trigger. The bullet entered Dutch's side, tearing through his gallbladder and liver. Dutch didn't fall. Not yet. He clutched his side, the white shirt turning a deep velvet crimson. Workman turned and ran, thinking the job was done. He had left Dutch Schultz alive, but only for a few more hours of agony. The beer baron was leaking life onto the bathroom floor, but the most shocking part of the night was yet to come. The police were about to find him, and Dutch was about to start talking. October 24, 1935, 01:30, Newark City Hospital. Dutch Schultz lay on a hospital bed, his body a map of trauma. He was burning up with a 106-degree fever. The lead in his gut was poisoning his blood, and his mind was fracturing. A police stenographer sat by his bed, pen poised over a notepad. What followed is one of the most famous and bizarre documents in criminal history, the deathbed delirium of Dutch Schultz. A boy has never wept, nor dashed 1,000 Kim. You can play jacks, and girls do that with a soft ball and do tricks with it. No, the police, don't let them in. He wasn't snitching. Even in his madness, the code of omerta held a ghost of a grip. But he was reliving his entire life in a stream of consciousness. He talked about his mother, about the Frenchman, and about the bruises on Otto's arm. Otto. The numbers didn't add up, he muttered, his voice a wet rattle. The bruises. They were purple, like grapes. I should have eaten the grapes. The detectives leaned in, desperate for a name. Who shot you, Arthur? Was it Luciano? Was it the Italians? Dutch turned his head, his eyes momentarily clearing. The boss. The big boss, he's got a heavy hand. Don't let the water run, the sink is overflowing. The tragedy of the right-hand man was that Otto Berman was already dead, lying on a cold slab in the morgue. He had died because Dutch suspected him of a betrayal that hadn't even happened yet. The bruises were a phantom, a trick played by the commission to make Dutch pull the trigger on his own stability. As the sun began to rise over Newark, the man who ruled the Bronx was reduced to a babbling child. But his final words would haunt the underworld for decades. The aftermath, 48 hours later. The news hit New York like a physical blow. The Dutchman was dead. Otto Berman, the genius, was dead. Lulu Rosenkrantz was dead. The empire was headless. The police investigation at the Palace Chop House revealed the sheer brutality of the hit. They found the table overturned, the steak Dutch had been eating still on the plate, now seasoned with gunpowder and lead. But it was the discovery of Otto Berman's body that truly told the story. When the coroner stripped the body, he found the bruises Dutch had obsessed over. But he found something else too. In Berman's pocket was a plane ticket to Florida and a letter. The letter wasn't to Thomas Dewey or Lucky Luciano. It was to a specialist in Miami. Berman was suffering from an advanced stage of a rare blood disorder, one that caused easy, severe bruising from even the slightest touch. Otto wasn't a snitch. He was a dying man trying to find a way to stay alive long enough to keep Dutch's books balanced. Dutch Schultz had murdered his most loyal friend because he couldn't distinguish between a medical symptom and a moral failure. Paranoia had become his final judge and executioner. The empire was carved up by the commission within a week. Lucky Luciano took the numbers, the Italians took the beer, and the name Schultz became a cautionary tale about what happens when you stop trusting the people who carry your weight. November 1935. The legend grows. Before Dutch died, rumors swirled about a mystery safe. It was said that Dutch, fearing the IRS and the commission, had packed a waterproof steel box with $7 million in gold, cash and bonds. According to the Efeito lender, Dutch had driven out to the Catskill Mountains with his bodyguard shortly before the Newark hit. They buried the box near a creek, marking the spot with a cryptic carving on a tree. When Dutch died in the hospital, the secret of the location died with him. His delirious ramblings, "The woods are deep, the water is cold," were analyzed by treasure hunters for the next 90 years. People began to see the massacre at the Palace Chop House differently. It wasn't just a gangland hit, it was a failed heist. The commission wanted that box. They hit Dutch to get the location, but they hit him too hard. The tragedy of the bruises on Otto Berman's arm was the catalyst. If Dutch hadn't turned on his inner circle, if he hadn't gone to Newark in a fit of paranoid isolation, he might have lived to dig that box up. Instead, the money stayed in the ground and the men who earned it stayed in the dirt. The error wasn't trying to hide the money, the legend says. The error was thinking the money would wait for him to come back. Even today, hikers in the Catskills look for a tree with a notched mark, unaware that the real treasure was the loyalty Dutch Schultz threw away in a Newark bathroom. The story of Dutch Schultz and the bruises on his right-hand man is more than a crime report. It's a study in the rot of power. In the end, Schultz was a man who lived by the sword and died by a misunderstanding. He saw a bruise and saw a traitor. He saw a friend and saw a target. The shocking thing he did next, sacrificing his team, attempting to assassinate a public official, and losing his mind in a public hospital, destroyed the very thing he spent his life building. The Schultz gang didn't just collapse, it evaporated. The mafia changed that night. The commission realized that mad dogs like Dutch couldn't be allowed to run free. Organized crime became organized. The era of the street-brawling baron was over. The era of the corporate mobster had begun. Every time a leader looks at their circle and sees enemies instead of allies, the ghost of Dutch Schultz is in the room. Every time paranoia replaces proof, the Palace Chop House is open for business. Dutch's last coherent words were reportedly, "Let me cut it out as if it were an apple." He wanted to cut out the rot. He didn't realize he was the rot. The bruises on Otto Berman weren't a sign of betrayal. They were a sign of humanity, fragile, breaking, and loyal to the end. And Dutch Schultz shocked the world by being the only man who couldn't see it. What would you have done in Dutch's shoes? If you saw a crack in your most trusted ally's story, would you have protected them, or would you have struck first to survive? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark heart of the Bronx Mafia, hit the like button and subscribe for more cinematic true crime stories. Leave a comment below. Was Dutch Schultz a genius who lost his way, or just a violent man whose luck finally ran out?